The stars had always been silent. For thousands of years, humanity looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They sent radio signals into the darkness. They launched probes that carried golden records with music and greetings in many languages. They waited for an answer that never came. But the universe was not empty. It was full of life, full of civilizations that had risen and fallen long before the first human walked on Earth. And among these civilizations, there were hunters, there were conquerors, there were those who looked at younger species the way a wolf looks at sheep. The Vorath hegemony was the greatest of these predators. They had started as a single species on a single world, just like humanity. But where humans dreamed of exploration and discovery, the Vorath dreamed only of power. They spread across the stars like a disease. They conquered 1,100 star systems. They enslaved dozens of species. The Solani, once proud builders of great cities, now worked in Vorath mines until their bodies broke. The Kreth, a peaceful people who had studied the mysteries of the universe, were nearly wiped out completely. Their crime was refusing to kneel. The Galactic Council, a gathering of the oldest and most powerful species in the known universe, watched the Vorath expand. They held meetings. They expressed concern. They wrote strongly worded statements, but they did nothing to stop the slaughter. The Vorath were not attacking them. After all, why risk war for the sake of lesser species? And so the hegemony grew stronger with each passing year. Supreme Commander Thelvok stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was old for a Vorath, his scales darkened with age, his eyes sharp with centuries of experience. He had personally overseen the conquest of 37 worlds. He had watched species beg for mercy and received none. He had built an empire on the bones of the weak. Now his fleet hung at the edge of a new star system. A yellow sun burned at its center, surrounded by 8 planets. The third planet from the sun was blue and green, covered with water and life. His scouts had been watching it for decades. The natives called it Earth. What do we know about these creatures? Thelvok asked his intelligence officer. They call themselves humans, Supreme Commander. They are young. Their first space flights happened less than 300 of their years ago. They have a small fleet of patrol ships, perhaps 200 vessels. Their weapons are primitive. Their shields are weak. They have never fought a war beyond their own world. Thelvok made a sound that might have been a laugh. Another easy conquest. Prepare the standard terms. The intelligence officer bowed and left. Thelvok turned to look at the blue planet on his screen. He felt nothing but contempt. These humans had built their little civilization in the shadow of the hegemony without even knowing it. They had sent their foolish messages into space, announcing their existence to anyone who might be listening. They had practically invited their own destruction. In the Vorath view of the universe, there were only 2 kinds of species, predators and prey. The humans were clearly prey. 6,000 warships filled the space around Earth's solar system. They were massive vessels, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a city. Their hulls were black as night, covered with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. They had destroyed fleets 10 times the size of anything Earth could field. Thelvok ordered the transmission sent. On Earth, the message arrived like a thunderbolt. Every screen, every radio, every communication device suddenly displayed the same image. A Vorath commander, his reptilian face filling the screen. His voice translated into every human language. People of Earth, I am Supreme Commander Thelvok of the Vorath hegemony. Your system now belongs to us. You will surrender completely and without condition. You will disarm all military forces. You will present your leaders for execution. Your population will be catalogued for labor assignments. You have 30 of your planetary rotations to comply. Resistance will result in the destruction of your world. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The transmission ended. Panic spread across the planet. People ran through the streets. Governments held emergency meetings. Military commanders looked at their forces and knew they were hopelessly outmatched. Religious leaders called for prayer. Scientists tried to analyze the alien technology and found it centuries beyond anything humanity possessed. It seemed like the end of everything. But in the deepest bunkers beneath the mountains of Switzerland, in the secret halls where Earth's true leaders gathered, there was no panic. There was only grim determination. The United Terran Council had existed in secret for almost 200 years. It had been formed after humanity's first detection of alien signals, signals that spoke of conquest and slavery, and the fall of civilizations. The founders had understood something terrible. The universe was not friendly. The stars were full of predators, and one day, those predators would come for Earth. So humanity had prepared. Director Chen Wei looked at the faces around the table. These were not the politicians the public knew. These were the shadows behind the shadows, the keepers of humanity's darkest secret. They had spent their lives preparing for this moment. The Ghost Protocol, Director Chen said quietly. It's time. Admiral Yuki Tanaka nodded. She was a small woman with gray hair and eyes like steel. Her family had served in the secret fleet for 3 generations. Her grandmother had helped design the first ships. Her mother had commanded the construction crews on Europa. Yuki herself had trained 10,000 officers for a war she hoped would never come. But it had come, and she was ready. The fleet is prepared, Tanaka said. 12,000 ships. All crews are at their stations. All systems are operational. We've been waiting for this day for a very long time. Director Chen turned to the communication officer. Send our response to the Vorath. All frequencies. I want every alien ear in this system to hear it. The message was simple. It was only 2 words. But those 2 words carried the weight of 2 centuries of preparation, of sacrifice, of hope. We decline. In orbit, Supreme Commander Thelvok received the human response. He read it twice, not quite believing what he was seeing. In all his centuries of conquest, no species had ever refused surrender. They always begged. They always pleaded. They always tried to negotiate. But these humans had simply said no. Thelvok felt something he had not felt in a very long time. It took him a moment to recognize it. It was curiosity. What could possibly make these primitive creatures think they could stand against the hegemony? He would enjoy finding out. And then he would enjoy crushing them. Prepare the fleet for assault, he ordered. We attack in 10 rotations. I want to give them time to understand their mistake. I want them to see our ships fill their sky. I want them to know the face of their destroyer before the end. His officers rushed to obey, but across the solar system, in places no Vorath sensor could detect, doors were opening, engines were warming, and humanity's true fleet was waking from its long sleep. The Vorath had conquered 1,100 star systems. They had crushed every enemy they had ever faced. They believed themselves invincible. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The moon had a dark side that never faced Earth. For billions of years, it had been nothing but rock and dust and silence. But 60 years ago, humanity had come to that dark side. They had drilled deep into the lunar surface. They had built something that no telescope on Earth could see, something that no alien probe could detect. Now, for the first time in decades, the massive doors began to open. Commander James Okonkwo stood in the control center of Lunar Base Shadow. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the hangar doors sliding apart, revealing the darkness of space beyond. Inside the hangar, row after row of ships waited. They were beautiful vessels, white as snow, their hulls curved and elegant. Each one was 200 meters long, bristling with weapons that the Vorath could not even imagine. How many ships in this base alone? Asked the young lieutenant beside him. 400, Okonkwo replied. And this is just one of 30 bases on the moon. The lieutenant did the math in his head. His eyes went wide. That's 12,000 ships, just from the moon, the asteroids, the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, the stations in the Kuiper Belt. Okonkwo smiled grimly. Humanity has been busy. Across the solar system, the Ghost Protocol was activating. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, the ice cracked open as massive vessels rose from the frozen ocean beneath. These were the dreadnoughts, the largest ships in the Terran fleet. Each one was 3 kilometers long, carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. They had waited in the cold darkness for 50 years, their crews rotating in and out, always ready, always waiting. In the asteroid belt, 100 rocks that had seemed ordinary suddenly split apart. They were not asteroids at all. They were camouflaged shipyards, hidden factories where humanity had built its secret fleet. Now those factories emptied their contents into space, and the darkness filled with white ships. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the TSS Defiance, the flagship of the Terran fleet. It was not the largest ship, but it was the most advanced. Its systems were connected to every other vessel in the fleet, allowing Tanaka to coordinate thousands of ships as if they were a single organism. She watched the status boards light up as each ship reported its readiness. Green lights spread across the display like stars being born. "Fleet status?" she asked. "All ships are reporting operational," replied her tactical officer. 12,417 vessels. All weapons hot. All shields charged. All crews ready. Tanaka nodded. "Open a channel to the fleet." She took a breath. For 40 years, she had trained for this moment. She had studied every battle in human history. She had learned from humanity's greatest commanders. She had run thousands of simulations, but nothing could truly prepare someone for the real thing. "This is Admiral Tanaka," she said, her voice carrying to every ship in the fleet. "For 200 years, our families have kept the secret. Your grandparents built these ships. Your parents maintained them. You trained your whole lives to crew them. Today, we finally fulfill our purpose." She looked at the tactical display, where 6,000 Vorath warships waited near Earth. "The aliens think we are weak. They think we are prey. They think they can take our home and enslave our people. They are wrong. We are humanity. We do not kneel. We do not surrender. We do not go quietly into the night." Across the fleet, men and women stood a little straighter, their hands steadied on their controls. Their hearts beat with a mix of fear and determination. "In a few hours we will face the enemy. Many of us may not survive, but I promise you this. The Vorath will remember this day forever. They will tell stories of this battle to their children and their children's children. They will speak of the day they came to conquer Earth, and Earth said no." She paused. "All ships prepare to move to combat positions. The White Armada rises. Humanity rises. Let's show them what we can do." The channel closed. Across the solar system, engines roared to life. 12,000 ships began to move, converging on Earth from every direction. On the Vorath flagship, Supreme Commander Telvok was growing impatient. He had given the humans 10 rotations to prepare for their destruction. It was more than enough time for them to understand their doom. Now he was ready to end this. "Supreme Commander," his sensor officer called out. "We are detecting activity throughout the solar system." Telvok frowned. "What kind of activity?" "Ships, Commander. Many ships. They are appearing from everywhere." Telvok walked to the sensor station. What he saw made his blood run cold. Contacts were appearing all over the tactical display. Behind Jupiter, in the asteroid belt, from the dark side of Earth's moon, from places where there should have been nothing but empty space, and they were not small contacts. These were warships, thousands of them, all converging on his position. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Our scouts would have detected a fleet this size. Commander, they were hidden, buried under ice, disguised as asteroids, hidden in places we never thought to look." Telvok felt something else he had not felt in centuries. It was fear. He quickly pushed it down. Numbers alone meant nothing. His ships were the finest in the galaxy. His crews were veterans of 100 conquests. These human vessels were untested. Their captains had never fought a real war. "All ships, battle positions," he ordered. "These humans have given us a surprise, but it changes nothing. We will crush them like we have crushed every enemy before them." His officers rushed to obey, but Telvok noticed something in their eyes. They were afraid too. They had never faced an enemy with superior numbers. They had always been the overwhelming force. Today, they were not. On the Defiance, Admiral Tanaka watched the Vorath fleet arrange itself for battle. They were forming a standard attack formation, the same formation they had used to conquer 1,000 worlds. They were predictable. They were arrogant. They thought superior experience would overcome inferior numbers. They were about to learn that humanity had studied them very carefully. "Admiral," said her tactical officer, "the enemy is in position. Shall we engage?" Tanaka shook her head. "Not yet. Let them come to us. Let them fire first." "Ma'am, the galaxy is watching," Tanaka explained. "Other species are monitoring this battle. I want everyone to see that we did not start this war. I want them to see that we gave the Vorath every chance to retreat. I want no one to doubt who the aggressor is." She opened a channel to the Vorath fleet. "Supreme Commander Telvok, I am Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Terran Defense Force. You demanded our surrender. We offer you one chance to retreat. Leave our system. Return to your space. Tell your leaders that Earth is not yours to take. This is humanity's only mercy." Telvok's face appeared on her screen. His reptilian features were twisted with rage. "You think to threaten me? You are nothing. Your species is nothing. I have conquered worlds with stronger defenses than yours. I will burn your planet to ash and sell your children to the slave markets of 100 worlds. So be it, Tanaka said quietly. You have made your choice. The channel closed. Tanaka looked at her tactical officer. All ships, prepare for combat. Today, we teach the galaxy what humanity is made of. The White Armada spread across space like a wave of pure light. 12,000 ships moved as one, their white hulls gleaming against the darkness. They were beautiful and terrible, a sight no enemy had ever seen. The Vorath had conquered 1,100 worlds. They had never faced anything like this. Supreme Commander Thelvok gave the order to attack. 6,000 Vorath warships surged forward, their weapons charging, their crews hungry for battle. They had conquered 1,000 worlds. They had never lost a war. They believed themselves invincible. Admiral Tanaka watched them come. She had studied every battle the Vorath had ever fought. She knew their tactics. She knew their weaknesses. She knew exactly how they would attack. All ships, she said calmly. Execute Formation Alpha 7. Engage railgun batteries on my command. The White Armada moved like water, flowing into a complex pattern that seemed chaotic but was actually perfectly designed. Each ship knew its place. Each captain trusted the network that connected them all. They moved as one organism, one mind, one will. The Vorath fired first. Thousands of energy beams cut through space, bright as tiny suns. They expected the human ships to scatter, to panic, to fall into disorder. That was what every other species had done when faced with Vorath firepower. The human ships did not scatter. Their shields flashed bright as they absorbed the attacks. The shields held. Thelvok stared at his tactical display in disbelief. That's impossible. Our weapons should have cut through their shields like paper. His science officer was frantically checking the data. Their shield technology is unknown to us, Commander. It operates on principles we do not understand. Our weapons are barely scratching them. Before Thelvok could respond, the humans fired back. Humanity had not developed energy weapons like the rest of the galaxy. Instead, they had perfected something far simpler and far more deadly. Railguns. These weapons used electromagnetic force to launch projectiles at incredible speeds, close to the speed of light itself. The projectiles were small, just a few kilograms of dense metal. But at such speeds, they hit with the force of nuclear bombs. 12,000 railguns fired at once. The Vorath shields were designed to stop energy weapons. They were not designed for physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The first volley tore through 300 Vorath ships like they were made of paper. Hulls shattered, reactors exploded, bodies were scattered into the void. Thelvok watched in horror as a tenth of his fleet vanished in an instant. Return fire, all weapons, focus on their lead ships. The Vorath poured everything they had into the attack. Missiles, energy beams, plasma torpedoes. The space between the fleets filled with deadly light. Some human ships were hit. Their shields flickered. A few shields failed, and those ships died in brilliant explosions. But for every human ship destroyed, 20 Vorath ships fell. On the Defiance, Admiral Tanaka felt no joy. She felt only grim determination. Men and women were dying on both sides. Each explosion represented hundreds of lives, ended in an instant. War was never glorious. No matter what the stories said, it was only terrible, but it was also necessary. The Vorath would never stop. They would never show mercy. If humanity lost this battle, every man, woman, and child on Earth would be enslaved or killed. There was no choice but to fight. Enemy fleet is attempting to regroup, her tactical officer reported. They're forming a defensive sphere around their flagship. They're protecting their commander, Tanaka observed. They think if they keep him alive, they can still win. She shook her head. Send battle groups 7 through 12 around their flanks. I want them surrounded. The White Armada flowed around the Vorath fleet like a river around a rock. The human ships were faster, more agile. Their AI coordination allowed them to avoid friendly fire while focusing their attacks on critical targets. The Vorath tried to counter, but they were too slow, too rigid in their tactics. Thelvok watched his fleet dying around him. He had never experienced anything like this. In all his centuries of war, he had always been the overwhelming force. He had always crushed his enemies with superior numbers and superior firepower. Now he was the one being crushed. Commander, his communications officer called out. We are receiving surrender requests from multiple ship captains. Surrender is not permitted, Thelvok snarled. Any captain who surrenders will have his family executed. Fight to the last ship, but his words meant nothing to captains who were watching their crews die around them. One by one, Vorath ships began to drop their shields and broadcast surrender signals. The human ships stopped firing on them and moved on to the next target. The battle had lasted 6 minutes. Half the Vorath fleet was already gone. Admiral Tanaka opened a channel to the enemy flagship. Supreme Commander Thelvok, your fleet is destroyed. Your captains are surrendering. You have lost. I offer you one more chance. Surrender now, and we will treat your survivors according to the laws of war. Continue fighting, and you will die. Choose. Thelvok's face appeared on the screen. His scales had gone pale with shock. His eyes were wide and empty. He looked like a creature whose entire world had collapsed. How? He whispered. How did you do this? You were supposed to be primitives. You were supposed to be prey. Tanaka leaned forward. That was your first mistake. You looked at us and saw only what you expected to see. You never considered that we might be something different, something new. What are you? We are humanity, Tanaka said simply. We are the species that looks up at the stars and refuses to be afraid. We are the species that prepares for the worst and hopes for the best. We are the species that fights for our home, our families, our future. We are not your prey, Commander. We never were. Thelvok stared at her for a long moment. Then his face hardened. I will not surrender. The hegemony does not surrender. We will fight to the last warrior. Tanaka nodded slowly. I expected nothing less. She closed the channel. All ships, she ordered. Focus fire on the enemy flagship. End this. 1,000 railgun rounds converged on the Eternal Dominion. The Vorath flagship's shields held for 3 seconds. Then they collapsed. The hull cracked. The reactor containment failed. Supreme Commander Thelvok, conqueror of 37 worlds, died in a ball of nuclear fire. The remaining Vorath ships surrendered immediately. The Battle of Sol was over. It had lasted 11 minutes. On Earth, people emerged from their shelters and looked up at the sky. They could see flashes of light where the battle had raged, but they did not yet know the outcome. They held their breath and waited. Then the announcement came. Every screen, every radio, every device carried the same message. People of Earth, this is Admiral Yuki Tanaka, Supreme Commander of Terran Strategic Forces. The enemy fleet has been destroyed. Our planet is safe. We have won. The celebration that followed was like nothing Earth had ever seen. People danced in the streets. Strangers embraced. Tears of joy flowed freely. Humanity had faced its greatest threat and emerged victorious. But Admiral Tanaka did not celebrate. She looked at the tactical display, counting the human ships that had been destroyed. 347 vessels, over 40,000 men and women who would never go home. They had died protecting their world. She would mourn them later. For now, there was work to be done, because Tanaka understood something that the celebrating crowds did not yet grasp. The Vorath hegemony was still out there. They still controlled 1,100 star systems. They still enslaved dozens of species, and when they learned what had happened at Sol, they would come back with everything they had. This battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Tanaka turned to her officers. Send a message to the Council. Tell them to prepare for Phase 2. Phase 2, Admiral? We're not going to wait for them to attack again, Tanaka said, her voice cold as space itself. We're taking the war to them. The White Armada had risen, and now it would carry humanity's fire to the stars. The survivors of the Vorath fleet limped back to hegemony space. Their ships were broken. Their spirits were shattered. They carried with them stories that their leaders refused to believe. Stories of a White Armada that filled the sky. Stories of weapons that punched through Vorath shields like they were nothing. Stories of a species that should have been easy prey but turned out to be the deadliest predator the galaxy had ever seen. The Vorath High Council gathered in their capital world. They listened to the survivors. They reviewed the sensor data. They watched recordings of the battle, and for the first time in the long history of the hegemony, they felt fear. This is impossible, said High Lord Vex, then the supreme ruler of the Vorath. These humans were supposed to be primitives. Our scouts observed them for decades. They had no military capability. They hid it from us, replied Admiral Kethral, one of the few commanders who had survived the Battle of Sol. They built their fleet in secret. They buried their ships under ice and inside asteroids. They waited for us to come, and then they destroyed us. Then we will send a larger fleet. We will crush them with overwhelming numbers. Admiral Kethral shook his head. High Lord, you do not understand. We did not lose because we were outnumbered. We lost because we were outmatched. Their technology is superior to ours. Their tactics are superior to ours. Their coordination is beyond anything I have ever seen. If we send another fleet, we will lose again. The High Council argued for days. Some wanted to sue for peace. Others wanted to throw every ship they had at Earth. Still others suggested abandoning the region entirely and hoping the humans would be satisfied with their victory. But the humans did not give them time to decide. 1 month after the Battle of Sol, the White Armada appeared at the edge of Vorath space. Not the entire fleet, but 100 battle groups, each one containing 100 ships, 10,000 warships, spread across 100 different systems, all arriving at the same moment. Admiral Tanaka had divided her forces carefully. Each battle group had a specific target: a military base, a shipyard, a supply depot, the places the Vorath needed to wage war. She was not attacking civilian populations. She was attacking the infrastructure of the hegemony itself. The first target was the shipyard at Veleth Prime, where the Vorath built their largest warships. It was defended by 500 vessels and orbital platforms bristling with weapons. It should have been impregnable. Battle Group 7 arrived with 92 ships. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it was over, the shipyard was slag, and every Vorath defender was dead or captured. Similar scenes played out across the hegemony. Wherever the Vorath had concentrated their military power, the white ships appeared. They struck fast, they struck hard, and then they moved on to the next target. The Vorath could not respond quickly enough. By the time reinforcements arrived at one system, the humans were already attacking 3 others. But humanity was not just destroying, they were also liberating. On the planet Celan, the original homeworld of the Celani people, 2 million slaves worked in the Vorath mines. They had been there for generations, their spirits broken, their hope destroyed. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. Then the white ships appeared in the sky. Lieutenant Sarah Chen led the ground forces that landed on Celan. She was 26 years old, born and raised in the secret training facilities of Luna. She had never seen an alien before, except in training simulations. Now she was walking through tunnels full of creatures that looked nothing like her. Creatures that stared at her with huge eyes full of disbelief. "We are here to help you," she said, her words translated by the device on her collar. "The Vorath are gone. You are free." The Celani did not understand at first. They had been slaves for so long that freedom was just a word, a concept from stories their grandparents told. But slowly, as they realized the Vorath guards were truly gone, something changed in their eyes. Hope returned. An old Celani approached Lieutenant Chen. He was bent and scarred, his body broken by decades of labor. Tears streamed down his face. "Why?" he asked. "Why did you come for us? You do not know us. We are nothing to you." Chen knelt down so she could look into his eyes. "Because no one should be a slave," she said simply. "Because we could not live with ourselves if we did nothing. Because this is what humanity does." The old Celani took her hand and pressed it to his forehead, a gesture of deep gratitude in his culture. "We will never forget," he whispered. "Never." Similar scenes played out on 100 worlds. The Kreth, a species the Vorath had nearly wiped out, emerged from the underground shelters where they had hidden for generations. The Vethkai, forced to fight in Vorath gladiatorial arenas, put down their weapons and wept. The Meridian, whose children had been taken as servants for Vorath nobles, reunited with families they thought they would never see again. The galaxy watched in amazement. This was not how wars were supposed to work. Conquerors conquered. They took what they wanted and left the rest in ruins. They did not risk their lives to free species that could offer them nothing in return. But humanity was different. The Galactic Council, which had done nothing while the Vorath enslaved and murdered across the galaxy, finally decided to act. They sent a diplomatic mission to Admiral Tanaka, requesting a meeting. They wanted to know what humanity intended. Tanaka agreed to meet them aboard the Defiance. The ambassadors arrived expecting to find a war room full of battle plans. Instead, they found a memorial wall, covered with the names and faces of every human who had died in the war so far. "Why do you fight?" asked Ambassador Velshi of the Andorian Collective, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. "You have already proven your strength. The Vorath will never threaten your world again." "Why continue?" Tanaka looked at the memorial wall. "How many species did the Vorath enslave while your council did nothing?" Velshi shifted uncomfortably. "That is not. We had concerns about 23 species," Tanaka interrupted. "We know because we studied your records. 23 species were conquered, enslaved, or exterminated while your council debated and delayed. You could have stopped the Vorath decades ago. You chose not to. We were protecting our own people. The risk of war was too great, and so you let others suffer instead." Tanaka turned to face the ambassador. "That is not humanity's way. We believe that freedom is not just for us. It is for everyone. We believe that evil must be opposed, even when it is dangerous. We believe that the strong have a duty to protect the weak." She gestured at the stars visible through the observation window. "Out there, right now, my ships are freeing slaves and destroying tyrants. My people are dying to liberate species they have never met. We are paying for your cowardice with our blood." Ambassador Velshi had no response. "Go back to your council," Tanaka said. "Tell them what you have seen. Tell them that humanity will finish what they should have started long ago. And when we are done, we will remember who stood with us and who stood aside." The diplomats left. Tanaka returned to her command. Within 6 months, the Vorath hegemony collapsed. Their military was destroyed. Their leaders were captured or killed. Their slave species were freed. 1,100 star systems that had lived in terror were suddenly free. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever. Now came the harder question. What would they do next? The galaxy held its breath. Humanity had done the impossible. They had emerged from nowhere and crushed the greatest military power in known space. They had liberated hundreds of worlds. They had proven themselves to be the most formidable species anyone had ever encountered. Now everyone waited to see what they would do with their power. History was full of examples. The Vorath had been conquerors who enslaved all they touched. The ancient Meridian Empire had expanded peacefully at first, then grown corrupt and oppressive. Even the Galactic Council, for all its talk of peace and cooperation, was really just a club of powerful species that protected their own interests. Surely humanity would follow the same path. Surely they would claim the former Vorath territories as their own. Surely they would demand tribute from the species they had freed. That was how the universe worked. Power existed to be used. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood before the Galactic Council. She was no longer just a military commander. The United Terran Council had appointed her as first ambassador, humanity's voice to the stars. She carried the weight of billions on her shoulders. The Great Hall was silent. Representatives of 100 species watched her, their eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. They had seen what the White Armada could do. They knew that humanity could crush them all if it chose. Tanaka looked at them and felt something unexpected. Pity. These ancient civilizations had lived in fear for so long that they could not imagine any other way. They expected humanity to become another Vorath because that was all they had ever known. She would show them something different. "Representatives of the Galactic Council," she began. "I come before you today not as a conqueror, but as a partner. Humanity has no desire to rule your worlds or control your people. We did not build the White Armada to create an empire. We built it to protect our home, and now we wish to extend that protection to everyone who wants it." Murmurs rippled through the hall. This was not what they had expected. For 200 years, we watched the galaxy from afar. We saw species rise and fall. We saw the strong prey upon the weak. We saw the Vorath enslave millions while this very council did nothing, and we decided that we would not be part of that cycle. We would break it. She paused, letting her words sink in. "Today, I present to you the Soul Accords, a new framework for galactic civilization. Not an empire, but an alliance. Not domination, but cooperation. Any species that wishes to join will be protected by the full strength of the Terran fleet. In return, they agree to respect the rights of all sentient beings, to never engage in slavery or conquest, and to come to the aid of their fellow members when threatened." Ambassador Velshi of the Andorian Collective rose from his seat. "And if we refuse to join, will your fleet compel us?" Tanaka shook her head. "No. Membership is voluntary. If you wish to go your own way, that is your right. But know this, The Soul Accords will oppose tyranny wherever it rises. If you choose to conquer and enslave, you will face the same fate as the Vorath. If you simply wish to be left alone, you will be left alone. The choice is yours. And what does humanity gain from this alliance? Asked another ambassador. Safety, Tanaka replied. The same thing everyone wants. A galaxy where no one has to live in fear, where children can grow up without the shadow of conquest hanging over them, where species can trade and learn from each other instead of fighting. That is what we gain. That is what everyone gains. The debate went on for hours. Some species were eager to join. The Solani, freshly freed from slavery, voted yes immediately. So did the Kreth, the Vethkai, and a dozen other species that had suffered under Vorath rule. They had seen humanity's mercy firsthand. They trusted it. Others were more cautious. The older powers, who had survived by avoiding conflict and minding their own business, worried about entanglement. What if joining the Soul Accords made them targets? What if humanity's idealism led them into wars they did not want to fight? But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Every species in the Galactic Council joined the Soul Accords. Tanaka watched the votes come in with quiet satisfaction. She had not been certain this would work. Humanity had taken an enormous gamble, betting that the galaxy was ready for something new. Now they would find out if they were right. In the years that followed, the Soul Accords transformed the galaxy. Trade flourished as species that had been enemies for centuries learned to cooperate. Scientific knowledge was shared freely, accelerating progress for everyone. Art, music, and literature crossed the boundaries of worlds, creating new forms of expression that no single species could have imagined alone. But the galaxy was not suddenly peaceful. There were still dangers. Pirate fleets that preyed on shipping lanes, rogue warlords who tried to carve out their own little empires, ancient evils that slumbered in the void between stars. When those threats arose, the call would go out. And from Earth, from the shipyards of Luna and Europa and the asteroid belt, the White Armada would answer, not as conquerors, not as overlords, but as protectors. 10 years after the Soul Accords were signed, Admiral Tanaka retired. She was old now, her hair white, her body tired. She had given her entire life to the fleet, first as a captain, then as an admiral, then as an ambassador. Now it was time to rest. Her granddaughter, Keiko, walked with her through the gardens of the memorial that had been built on Luna. The walls were covered with names, hundreds of thousands of them, every human who had died in the Vorath War and the conflicts that followed. Grandmother, Keiko asked, do you ever regret it? All the fighting, all the death. Tanaka looked at the names. She had known many of them personally. Friends, colleagues, men and women who had trusted her to lead them into battle. Every death was a weight she would carry forever. No, she said finally. I regret the necessity. I regret that the galaxy was the kind of place where such violence was needed. But I do not regret what we did. We gave the galaxy something it had never had before. Hope. We showed them that it was possible to be strong without being cruel, to be powerful without being oppressive. That is worth any price. Keiko nodded slowly. She was training to be a captain herself, following in the family tradition. She would carry the torch forward. What happens when humanity is gone? She asked. What happens when the White Armada can no longer protect everyone? Tanaka smiled. That is the real goal, child. Not to protect the galaxy forever, but to teach it to protect itself. Every year, more species build their own fleets, train their own soldiers, stand on their own feet. Someday, they will not need us anymore. Someday, the Soul Accords will be strong enough to survive without human leadership. That is the future we are building. She looked up at the stars, visible through the dome above them. So many stars, so many worlds, so many beings living their lives, free from the fear that had haunted the galaxy for so long. We were told to surrender, she said softly. We were told to kneel. Instead, we taught the stars to stand. That is humanity's legacy. That is what we will be remembered for. Keiko took her grandmother's hand. Together, they watched the stars shine. And in the vastness of space, the White Armada kept its eternal watch, protectors of the weak, defenders of the free, humanity's gift to the galaxy, forever.